I was really shocked when my daughter stormed into the room, furious. "Dad, how dare you kick Mom out over a tiny affair? It's not a big deal," she yelled, her voice shaking with anger. I looked at her, stunned. I caught her cheating. I'm divorcing her. That's when she said the words that cut deeper than any betrayal. "If you do this and don't let her back in, then you are no longer my father." I always thought I had the perfect family. A loving wife, a smart and beautiful daughter, and a home filled with laughter. But nothing could have prepared me for the betrayal that shattered everything. One evening, I came home feeling uneasy, as if something was terribly wrong. I had no proof, just a gut feeling gnawing at me. And when I finally decided to dig deeper, I found the truth, one that was far worse than my worst fears. My wife was cheating on me. Not just a moment of weakness or a one-time mistake. This was a full-blown affair. A calculated betrayal. And the worst part? My daughter knew. She had known all along and helped her mother hide it from me. When I confronted my wife, she showed no guilt, no remorse. Instead, she tried to justify it. "It was just a small mistake. You're blowing this out of proportion," she said, as if my pain meant nothing. But the real shock came when my daughter stormed into the room, furious. "Dad, how dare you kick Mom out over a tiny affair?" "It's not a big deal," she yelled, her voice shaking with anger. I looked at her, stunned. "I caught her cheating. I'm divorcing her." That's when she said the words that cut deeper than any betrayal. "If you do this and don't let her back in, then you are no longer my father." She didn't wait for my response. She turned around and left, heading straight for the car where my wife was waiting with her bags packed. I stood there for a moment, letting it all sink in. My own daughter had chosen her mother, the woman who had betrayed me, over me. But she didn't know everything. Not yet. I walked to my bedroom, opened my drawer, and pulled out an envelope. The DNA test results I had taken not long ago. When I returned, I handed it to her and simply said, "I think now you might want to reconsider your decision." She grabbed the papers, her face still filled with anger, until she read the first few lines. Her hands started shaking, her legs gave out, and right there, in front of me, she collapsed to the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. As my daughter collapsed, tears streaming down her face, I could only watch. My emotions, a mix of sadness, anger, and vindication. The truth had hit her harder than I anticipated. She had helped her mother cover up a lie for so long, and now all of it was crashing down on her. The silence between us was deafening. I waited, letting the reality of the situation sink in. This wasn't just about me or her mother anymore. It was about the shattered trust between us. But I wasn't going to back down. My daughter finally looked up at me, her face pale, her eyes red from crying. She looked almost lost, as if she didn't know where to turn. "What did you mean by this?" she whispered, her voice trembling. I sighed, sitting down across from her. "You've known for a long time, haven't you?" I said. "You knew your mother wasn't being honest with me. You knew she was lying to both of us." Her eyes widened. "No, Dad, I didn't want to believe it. But I didn't know how to stop her. I couldn't." She trailed off, guilt flooding her words. I could see how torn she was. She loved her mother, and she didn't want to betray her. But she also realized that by staying silent, she had betrayed me. Her loyalties were torn between the woman who raised her, and the man who had always been there for her. I let her cry for a while, feeling the weight of the situation pressing down on me. But I knew I had made the right choice. No matter how much it hurt, the truth needed to come out. After a long silence, I stood up and walked to the window. "This isn't just about what your mother did," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "This is about what you and I will do now. I'm going to make things right, and I'm going to move on. I've had enough of the lies, and I'm not going to let her or anyone else pull me back into that toxic mess." I turned around to face her, seeing the sadness in her eyes, but also the realization that I wasn't going to back down. "You have to decide where you stand now. This is your choice." She looked at the ground, her tears still flowing. "I don't know what to do, Dad. I don't want to lose you." I walked over to her, kneeling down so I was at her level. "You won't lose me. But you have to understand that I'm doing this for me too. For both of us." She nodded silently, though the tears didn't stop. But I knew then that she understood. It wasn't just about her mother's betrayal anymore. It was about the road ahead and the choices we both had to make. That night, I called a lawyer. The divorce papers were drafted, and I knew there was no going back. But the hardest part wasn't the divorce itself. It was the fact that in the end, I had lost my family. The next day, my wife came to the house, pleading for me to reconsider. She apologized, begged me to take her back, and promised that it would never happen again. But I knew I couldn't go back. The trust had been shattered beyond repair. I looked at her coldly. "It's too late for that," I said. "You've already made your choice, and now I'm making mine. The divorce is final." She stood there, speechless, for a moment, before she finally walked away. I could hear her footsteps echoing through the empty house, the sound of everything I had built with her slowly falling apart. But as painful as it was, I knew this was the only way I could truly move forward. As my daughter collapsed to the floor, sobbing uncontrollably, a chill swept over me. It wasn't the relief I had expected. It was something far more unsettling. Watching her in this state, I couldn't help but wonder if I had gone too far. But I had no time for second guessing. I had to see this through. She struggled to catch her breath between sobs. "How could you do this, Dad?" she gasped. "How could you just end everything? She's your wife. I thought you loved her." I didn't respond right away. I just watched her, my thoughts racing. This wasn't just about a cheating wife anymore. It was about everything I had ever known. The life I thought we had, the family we were supposed to be. Finally, I spoke, my voice calm but cutting. "I loved her. I did. But what she did, and what you helped her do, that's something I can never forget. I can't be the fool anymore. Not for her. Not for you." Her face twisted with confusion and hurt, but I couldn't take it back. "You need to make a choice now," I added, my words heavy with finality. "You stay with me, or you stay with her. But you can't have both. And you better think long and hard about this, because there's no going back." She was silent for a long time. The tears still fell, but they were slower now, as though she was thinking, weighing her decision. I could feel the tension building, the silence pressing down on us. It was almost suffocating. Then, just as I thought she might speak, the doorbell rang. A sharp, unexpected sound that cut through the tension like a knife. I froze. The last thing I wanted was to face her again. My wife, the woman who had shattered my trust, who had lied, who had betrayed me. But that's exactly what I was about to do. I walked slowly to the door, feeling my heartbeat accelerate with each step. When I opened it, there she was. She stood there, her face pale, her eyes desperate. She had brought her things with her, packed into a suitcase, a symbol of everything she was leaving behind. "Please," she begged, her voice shaky. "We can fix this. We can start over. Let's talk. Please, don't do this. Don't end our family like this." I stood in the doorway, staring at her, trying to find the right words. But my anger, my hurt, it was all so overwhelming. How could I let her back in after everything? Suddenly, my daughter appeared in the hallway, looking between us with conflicted eyes. She stepped forward, and I could see the hesitation in her every movement. She wanted to say something, but the words weren't coming. She was trapped between two worlds, hers and mine. "You don't get it, do you?" I finally said, my voice dangerously calm. "You've already crossed a line. You've chosen him over me. You've chosen this affair over our family." Her eyes flickered with guilt. But she didn't back down. "I made a mistake. Please don't make this permanent. We can fix it. For our daughter. For us." My daughter's voice cut through the air. "Don't believe her, Dad. She's lying. I saw it. I saw everything. She doesn't want us. She wants him." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. The truth was out there now, but hearing it from my daughter, it was too much. It was the final blow. I turned my back on both of them, my mind made up. But just as I was about to shut the door, I heard something I wasn't expecting. The sound of a car engine revving up outside. I rushed to the window and looked down at the driveway. My wife's car was parked there, but now there was another vehicle. A black SUV I hadn't seen before. My heart skipped a beat. What was happening? I turned back to my wife, who was still standing in the doorway. "What the hell is that?" And I mentioned, looked at me, her face an open book of pen. It's nothing, just someone I know." But I knew better. My instincts were screaming at me. There was something she wasn't telling me. Something bigger was unfolding right before my eyes. I stepped back, grabbing my phone from the table. "I'm done here. Divorce papers are already filed, and you need to leave now. But before you go, I have something you need to see." I watched her face go pale. I didn't need to explain what I meant. My hands shook as I opened the door to the room I had locked for so long. The room filled with secrets. The evidence I had gathered. The DNA test results. The final piece to the puzzle. But just as I was about to show her everything, the sound of tires screeching echoed in the driveway. My heart raced. The screeching tires outside sent a shiver down my spine. It wasn't just any car. It was the unmistakable sound of someone speeding off, as if they were in a hurry to escape. I stood frozen for a moment, my mind racing. Who could it be? My gut told me something wasn't right. I quickly moved to the window, trying to catch a glimpse of the car that had just sped off. But all I saw was the tail end disappearing around the corner. I turned back to my wife, whose eyes were wide with fear. She was visibly sweating, her hands trembling. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice low and cold. I wasn't asking anymore. I was demanding the truth. She stammered, her words barely forming. It's nothing. I don't know. Maybe it was just someone passing by. I didn't buy it. Every instinct in me screamed that there was more to this than she was letting on. Don't lie to me anymore. This is the end of the line. I want the truth. And I want it now. Before she could respond, there was a knock at the door. It wasn't the kind of knock you expect when someone's just passing by. It was urgent, sharp, as if someone had something important to say. I opened the door cautiously. On the other side stood a man I didn't recognize. A tall, well-dressed man wearing dark sunglasses, even though it was well into the evening. His demeanor was cold, almost businesslike. "Are you the one divorcing your wife?" he asked, his voice gruff, unyielding. I didn't answer right away, my mind spinning with questions. Who was this guy? Why was he asking about my divorce? Before I could respond, he pushed past me, stepping into the foyer. "I think you need to see something." The air felt heavier as I stepped back, my heart thudding in my chest. My wife's face had gone as white as a sheet, and I could see her eyes darting around in panic. She clearly knew who this man was, but she wasn't saying a word. The stranger pulled out a folder from under his arm and placed it on the coffee table in front of me. Without saying another word, he opened it. Inside were photographs. Pictures of my wife and the man from the black SUV. They weren't just casual photos. They were intimate, up-close shots taken in places I never would have imagined. Restaurants, hotels, even a private beach. Every one of them screamed one thing. This wasn't just an affair. It was something far deeper. I felt my stomach twist. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice shaking with a mix of fury and disbelief. "I'm someone who has been watching her." "You've been played, my friend," he replied, his voice devoid of sympathy. "That man you saw leaving earlier? He's not just some casual lover. He's been part of a much bigger picture. Your wife has been involved in something that goes beyond infidelity. And you need to understand that before you go making any decisions." I stared at him, my mind struggling to comprehend his words. What could be bigger than the betrayal I had already uncovered? He seemed to sense my confusion and continued. "This isn't just about cheating. There's money involved, deals, and people with a lot of power. Your wife, she's been playing you, but she's also been playing some dangerous people." I took a step back, almost recoiling at the weight of his words. I looked at my wife, but she wouldn't meet my eyes. She knew. She knew this was all unraveling, but she had no way to stop it. "You have two choices now," the man said, his eyes narrowing, locking onto mine. "You can either walk away and leave this mess behind, or you can get involved. But let me warn you, once you know the truth, there's no going back." I felt the walls closing in around me. My head was spinning with confusion, with fear, but also with a strange sense of determination. I wasn't going to let this go. I wasn't going to be played anymore. "What do you want from me?" I asked, my voice hardening. "I want you to understand what you're up against," he said, his tone almost matter-of-fact. "The choice is yours, but whatever you decide, you need to know that your wife is no innocent bystander in all of this. She's been playing both sides. And the people behind her, they don't forgive easily." He turned to leave, but before he did, he looked back at me one last time. "The clock's ticking. The truth is out there. Now it's up to you how you handle it." And with that, he was gone. I stood there in the silence that followed, the weight of his words pressing down on me. My wife was standing there too, silent, her eyes full of fear and something else. Regret. But it didn't matter now. The truth was bigger than any of us. And I wasn't backing down. The man's words echoed in my mind, long after he had left. Dangerous people? Deals? Money? What had I gotten myself into? It wasn't just about a cheating wife anymore. It was about something far darker, something that went beyond anything I had ever imagined. I looked at my wife, who had now taken a step back, her arms crossed protectively over her chest. She seemed small, almost fragile in that moment. The woman who had once been the center of my world was now a stranger, hiding secrets that were slowly unraveling before my eyes. "Who is he?" I asked, my voice trembling with anger and confusion. "What is this all about? You've been involved with people I don't even know?" Her eyes flickered to the ground. For a moment I thought she wouldn't answer, but then she slowly looked up, her face pale. I didn't want you to know," she whispered. "I didn't want you to be dragged into this. But now you can't avoid it. The man you saw earlier, he's not just some lover. He's someone who's been helping me with something." I was already feeling overwhelmed by the weight of the situation. But hearing her admit it, was like a slap to the face. "Helping you with what? What could possibly be worth all of this? The lies, the betrayal, the destruction of our family?" She hesitated, clearly struggling with her next words. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "I was never just with you because of love. I married you for security. My family. They needed money. My mother's treatment. It was too expensive. And when I met him, he offered me a way out. A way to provide for my family, to make sure we never had to worry again." I felt a cold numbness sweep over me. She had used me. All this time, I had thought I was the one she loved, the one she had chosen. But in reality, I had just been a means to an end. "You've been lying to me for years," I said, my voice barely above a growl. "And now you want me to just accept that?" She shook her head, tears welling up in her eyes. "I never wanted to hurt you. I never meant for it to go this far. But when I got involved with him, I thought I could have both worlds. I could have you, and I could have security. I never expected it to get this complicated." Her words barely registered. I was too far gone in my rage and disbelief. And my daughter? Was she part of this? Did she know about all this? For the first time, I saw a flicker of guilt in her eyes. "No, she didn't know. She's just a kid. I kept her out of it. I never wanted her to get caught in the middle." The mention of my daughter brought everything crashing back. Her face, her tears, her shock when I showed her the DNA test. It was all too much. I had promised myself I would protect her, but now I wasn't sure who I could trust anymore. Suddenly, the doorbell rang again. I froze. Another unexpected knock, this time louder and more urgent. My heart raced. Who could it be this time? I didn't want to answer it, but something told me I had no choice. I walked cautiously to the door, the tension in the air thick and suffocating. When I opened it, I wasn't prepared for what I saw. Standing there was a man, tall, well-dressed, and with an air of confidence that sent a shiver down my spine. He wasn't like the first man, though. This one looked familiar. It took me a moment, but then it hit me. This was the man from the photographs, the one who had been with my wife. He didn't say a word at first. He just stared at me as if sizing me up, waiting for me to speak. My hands clenched into fists, but I fought the urge to lash out. I needed answers, not violence. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice steady, but my heart was pounding in my chest. He smiled, but it wasn't friendly. It was cold, calculated. "I think you and I need to have a talk," he said, his voice smooth. "But not here. Not in front of her." He motioned to my wife, who was standing just behind me. She flinched at his words, her face paling even further. "We've got a lot to discuss," he continued, his smile widening. "And I think you'll want to hear what I have to say." The chill in his voice made my blood run cold. I didn't know what this man had to say, but I knew one thing for certain. He wasn't here to make peace. And the more I stood there, the more I realized that whatever this was, it wasn't just about my wife's affair anymore. It was about something far more dangerous. Something I had never expected. I stepped aside, letting him in, my mind racing with questions. What was this man really after? What had he been involved in? And most importantly, how much more of this twisted story was I about to uncover? The man stepped inside without another word, his sharp eyes scanning the room as if he were making a mental note of everything. His presence was suffocating, like a shadow that followed every movement. I led him into the living room, my mind racing with 1,000 questions. "Who are you? What is this all about?" I demanded once more, my patience wearing thin. He took a seat across from me, without hesitation, crossing his legs and leaning back casually in his chair. It was almost as if he had all the time in the world, like he wasn't standing on the precipice of something that could explode at any second. "My name is Victor," he said, his voice steady and almost too calm. "And what I'm about to tell you will change everything you thought you knew." I clenched my fists, trying to hold back the storm that was building inside me. I wasn't sure if I wanted to strangle him or hear what he had to say. But part of me, a part I couldn't ignore, needed answers. My wife was standing in the doorway, her face ashen, her hand gripping the frame as if she were holding herself up. Victor looked at her briefly before turning his gaze back to me. "Your wife has been playing a dangerous game, and so have you. She wasn't just having an affair with me. She's been involved in something much bigger. Something that you've been blind to all this time." I felt my blood run cold. "What do you mean? What are you talking about?" He leaned forward, his eyes locking onto mine. "She's been working with a network of people who don't care about right or wrong. They only care about money, power. And you've been feeding into it without even realizing it." I looked at my wife, who had finally broken her silence, her voice barely above a whisper. "Victor, stop. You don't have to do this." But he wasn't listening to her. He continued, his voice darkening with each word. "She's been laundering money, using your name, your business connections. She's been playing both sides, using you for the security you offered, and using people like me to make sure she stays in control." My world was crashing down around me. Every word he spoke was a blow, tearing away the foundation I thought I'd built. Money laundering my wife? The woman I thought I knew, my partner for years, had been hiding this from me? It was too much. I could feel my heart racing, blood rushing to my head as my vision blurred. "No, I said, shaking my head. This is some kind of sick joke. It's not possible. Victor stood up, taking a step closer, the weight of his words settling over me like a heavy blanket. It's not a joke, my friend. She's been taking your trust, your resources, and feeding them to people you'd never want to meet. And now it's your turn to decide. Will you take the fall for her, or will you walk away from this mess? I turned to my wife, who was trembling, her eyes full of fear. But there was no apology, no remorse. Is it true? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Have you been using me? Using us to hide your secrets? She didn't answer right away, and when she did, it was with a heaviness that seemed to suffocate the air around us. I never meant for it to get this far, she said, tears streaming down her face. I did it for my family, for us, but I couldn't stop. I couldn't get out. Victor's laugh was low, almost mocking. She could have stopped any time, but the money, the power, the control, it was too addictive. She's been living in a world of lies, and now it's all coming crashing down. I wanted to scream, to shake her until she told me everything, but I couldn't. I was numb, each word from Victor driving the knife deeper into the wound. The woman I thought I knew, the woman I had loved, had been living a double life, a life I had never even suspected. And it wasn't just her anymore. It was me. I was tangled in her web, and now I had to decide what I was going to do about it. Victor stood there for a moment, letting the silence fill the room. His presence was like a weight I couldn't shake off, and it felt like the walls were closing in. So, what's it going to be? He asked, breaking the silence. Are you going to confront this head-on and fight for what's yours? Or are you going to walk away from the wreckage she's caused? I didn't answer immediately. My mind was still spinning, trying to process the betrayal, the deception. But one thing was clear. I couldn't let this go. I had to take control. I had to decide my next move. And I wasn't going to let her or anyone else dictate that. You'll regret this, I said, my voice cold, eyes locked on Victor. Both of you will. He gave a small, almost amused shrug. We all have regrets. But the real question is, what are you going to do about it? I stood there for a moment, my heart pounding in my chest. The decision was mine to make, and whatever I decided, there was no going back. The room felt like it was closing in on me. The weight of everything, my wife's betrayal, Victor's revelation, the lies, pressing on my chest. My hands were shaking, but I couldn't back down. I had to take control, had to end this once and for all. Victor stood there, watching me, like a predator waiting for its prey to make the wrong move. But I wasn't going to make the mistake of letting them drag me further into their twisted world. I turned to my wife, my gaze cold. I've given you every chance to tell me the truth. You chose your path. Now I'll choose mine. Her face twisted with desperation. Please, don't do this. I never wanted any of this to happen. I just wanted a way out of the pressure. I didn't mean to hurt you. The words were hollow. They meant nothing now. What she had done to me, to our family, it was unforgivable. I walked over to the door, opening it wide. Get out, I said, my voice firm, unwavering. You're not welcome here anymore. Take your things and leave. And take them with you. Victor's smile faded, but he didn't argue. He was used to control, used to manipulating situations, but he didn't expect someone to stand up to him like this. He looked at my wife, who was frozen in place, and then at me with an expression of mild amusement. "You think this is over?" he asked. "You think you can just walk away from this?" I didn't flinch. "I'm not walking away from anything. I'm taking my life back. You're the one who's done. Both of you." The silence that followed was thick with tension. My wife looked at me, her face a mixture of regret and fear. But I had no sympathy left for her. She had made her choices. I had made mine. I turned and walked toward the staircase, my footsteps echoing in the house. I couldn't stay here anymore. Not with her, not with him, not with any of the lies. "You're not my family anymore," I said, not even looking back. "You don't get to destroy what's left of this." As I reached the top of the stairs, I heard her call out to me one last time, her voice breaking. "Please, don't leave me. Don't leave us." But it was too late. The damage had been done. She had made her bed, and now she had to lie in it. I packed my things in silence. I knew what I had to do. I couldn't let myself be a part of this toxic mess any longer. My daughter, she deserved better. And I couldn't let her grow up thinking that this was what love looked like. Later, as I walked out of the door, I saw her car parked in the driveway. My daughter sat in the front seat, her face buried in her hands, crying. She didn't understand why I was doing this. She didn't understand the magnitude of the situation. But I knew she would one day. I opened the door and sat next to her. She looked at me, her eyes full of pain and confusion. "Daddy, why are you doing this? Why can't we just fix things?" I hugged her tightly, the weight of everything pressing down on me. But I couldn't let her see that. I had to be strong for her. "We can't fix it, sweetie. Not this. Not anymore. But I'll always be here for you. You don't have to worry about that." Her sobs quieted, and we sat there in silence for a long time. The only sound, the soft hum of the engine. In the end, I didn't just lose my wife. I lost the family I thought I knew. But I found something more important. My own peace. I found the strength to walk away from the lies and the betrayal. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could finally breathe. I wasn't going to be dragged down by their mistakes. I wasn't going to let them take any more from me. I had learned the hard way that sometimes the only way to find redemption is to walk away. And that was the only revenge I needed. In life, sometimes the hardest thing to do is to let go of what we thought was safe, comfortable, or familiar. But holding on to toxic relationships, whether they involve betrayal, lies, or manipulation, only keeps us from finding true peace and happiness. In this story, the protagonist learns a powerful lesson. Sometimes, the best form of revenge isn't about exacting pain on those who hurt us, but about reclaiming our own lives. When we're faced with betrayal, it can be easy to spiral into anger and bitterness. But true strength lies in knowing when to walk away and choose a healthier future for ourselves.